When you understand reality as a space of participation, of a space of resonance, you understand all how Neoplatonism is everything is in everything in an appropriate way.
A certain sound will trigger this trace in the soul that reminds it of the divine harmony it heard when it was up with the gods before it descended into a body.
Music reminds us that we're not just notes all by ourselves. We belong to a song.
Oh dear Diana, tell me why do the things that are beautiful always have a darker side? Oh dear Diana, tell me why is the good never good enough? Underneath the dirt and scar is an old and familiar face.
Welcome back to another episode of The Ladder, Journeys in Platonic Mysticism. Today, I'm delighted to be joined with colleagues from Palinode Productions, two of the most awesome content curators within the belly, the womb, that is Cora. That will be for another episode to go into that more. But today, we get to do something that I absolutely love, which is to geek out about Neoplatonism, music and harmony, and the world soul, particularly things that we find in Proclus, and yeah, due to that work. So with me is Sebastian Moro, independent scholar, whose expertise is in Neoplatonism and the philosophy of music, as well as Stephen Rego, the organizer, the Renaissance man, the jack of all trades, who runs the ISNS, or not ISNS, the Neoplatonism, I'm crazy, the Neoplatonism Facebook page, and seriously, one of the wicked, sharpest minds when it comes to the very important nitty-gritty details of all the various different hierarchies. He's the man I go to when I'm trying to map out all the various different placements of gods and levels and realities. And so I invite you guys all to check out their work, their research, and yeah, their creative projects. So, all right, I'm going to open with, yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to open with a very simple question, right? So a lot of the people who are listening right now may or may not be scholars of Neoplatonism and or the philosophy of music, or things that revolve around the Timaeus and or commentaries on the Timaeus. And so could you guys just give me a background of the kinds of texts that we're going to be talking about today and the centrality of questions of music and harmony in those texts?
Well, yes, we can mention that in the Platonic tradition, music is a central discipline, especially for the Republic. In the Republic of Plato, we have music as education of the soul, and also the harmonization of the faculties, or what is sometimes referred as the parts of the soul. So there is the harmony of the soul that is also projected in the society. And the society is also a mirror of the cosmos. So that's when the Timaeus enters into this picture, because the Timaeus is the dialogue where Plato depicts the cosmogony, the origin of the universe in terms of music, because the cosmos has a world soul, and the world soul is created in a musical way. So we've been studying with Stephen how Proclus connects many of the Platonic dialogues into a whole philosophy of music, because he also uses the Cratylus commentary when he studies the name of Apollo, the name of the Muses, and he depicts the activity of Apollo. But in the Timaeus, Proclus says that the activity of the Demiurge, who is Zeus, it's also an activity that creates harmony. So there is also the topic of the harmonic assimilation of the person to the universe, and because this person lives in a society, the whole society harmonizes or tune in with the universe. So that's part of.
Sorry, I was going to say another very important text is, or key text dialogue, is the Republic, because there's a large part of music in discusses musicae, or the true philosophy, true music, which is philosophy, And from that, he has Essay 6, which is an exposition of the philosophy of music according to Proclus. And that's a key text because that structures the diagram that we are using as central to our research.
Yeah, and it helps also, integrate some of the mathematics with regards to music as well, right? So that when we think about what music really is, it's number in a physical, corporeal way, right? Like it's being made manifest, right? This is one of the things I love about Platonism. I love about Pythagoreanism. I love about, a lot of the work that we're going to do today, which is how is it possible that something supposedly incorporeal, like 1 or 2 or 3, can have such a dramatic effect on us when we start working with them and learning how to harmonize with regards to our lives, our souls, the world, so on and so forth. And so it's interesting because not many people in this 2026 world would think of music, right, as something that has the ability to produce virtue. How is it that you see this in the Platonic tradition and in the texts that you research? Why is this not just about music? How is all the questions that we're going to be talking about today really about healing and purifying and making it possible to live eudaimonia, to live the flourishing life?
Sebastian?
Well, that's one of the greatest questions, and because Proclus and following Plato say that eudaimonia is what corresponds to the universe life also, no? Because when Plato says that the universe has been created by the demiurge, that is like a divine living being that is a god starts living a life that is eudaimonic because it's complete. In the eudaimonic tradition, also in Aristotle, living is eudaimonic life is to achieve the telos of life, no? So I think music collaborates in this because music is a form of genosis. When the philosophers like Iamblichus define music following Nicomachus of Gerasa or other Neo-Pythagoreans or even Philolaus, they mentioned that this kind of life is a complete life, it's a harmonious life, and harmony produces this unification. When the soul starts to be fragmented or identified with fragmentation and division, is when the soul enters into this disarrangement of its own circles, emotions, motions, but because in the Timaeus, Plato defines this as the inner motions of the soul that are disarranged when the souls enter into the physical world. So music helps, because music is therapy also. There was this famous analogy in the Pythagorean school that what medicine is for the body, music is for the soul, no? So in that way, music is what leads us to the good life, no? Because it's also protreptic in a way. That's another character of music. Music helps the soul turn around. Like protrepsis means turn around towards you.
I think, sorry, Sebastian, one of the things which is typical of Proclus, as you know, is he likes his hierarchy. So in his commentary on the Republic, he identifies there's 4 levels of music. The highest is philosophy, the tree music. The lowest is educative by the muses. And when I started looking at that, I suddenly sort of thought, well, the muses and Apollo and Dionysus are there, and these are all also reflected in the 4 types of divine madness, which is something that I was very interested in prior to getting into this project. So I've done a lot of work on that, and you've had Michael Griffin and Son Solis on here earlier, a couple of episodes ago, and they were talking about the virtues and inspirations. Now, I'd been looking at all that stuff through the lens of divine inspiration, and when I saw music and link between Apollo, Dionysus, and the muses and the inspiration from them, it was quite clear that there was going to be able to map them on a one-to-one level basis. Then I discovered a paper by Dominic O'Meara, which was called Levels of Music and the Virtues in Neoplatonism, which did exactly that. So I took that, and I've then found that Proclus also did 4 levels of harmony that map perfectly onto music, 4 levels of number, which map onto that. So one of the tasks that I'm setting myself is to have these levels of harmony, music, inspiration, virtue, all mapped out as Proclus sees it, but taking bits of people like Hermias and Olympiodorus. So music isn't just instrumental music. There's intelligible music, there's anagogic music, there's what's ecstatic music, which is Dionysian. So music is all about relationships of numbers at an abstract level, but it's also then mapped in very practical terms by Proclus in terms of virtue, and he also maps different types of life. So when he talks about 3 types of poetry, he talks about inspired poetry, mimetic poetry at the bottom. He also says there's 3 types of life that are suited to these types of poetry. So you can see, you can start combining the practical with the abstract very easily through these concepts. And that's what I've been trying to do, because I'm very systematic, whereas Sebastian's got the diffuse, eclectic, can use it as a means to look at modern philosophy, Nietzsche's version of Apollo and Dionysus and stuff like that. So it's such a fecund topic that it's difficult to know where to stop, which is what made our presentation in Leuven back at the ISNS quite difficult. So we narrowed it down to Apollo and Dionysus, which is a dialectic known by many people outside of Neoplatonism, because you see it in Jung, you see it in Nietzsche, you see it in the Renaissance. So it's such a rich concept, music, that it's, when you look at the etymology, musicae is the of the muses. So it's such a broad concept.
It's like you read
and
my
that's what we're
mind. That
trying
was
to
exactly
explore.
what I was going to ask you, is to, this kind of understanding and reminding people that, music is actually to be inspired, right? To have the muse and there are different muses for different types of music. And so that when we think of Calliope or other muses, they have different kinds of things that they put into our hearts, right? And so that when we think music, it's not necessarily it's not, Britney Spears. No offense to Britney Spears.
Exactly.
But it's more than that. It's an entire way of life. Somebody could be living a musical life, or a poetic life. And we use the word poesis. And remember that poesis doesn't mean poetry as Diotima emphasizes in the symposium of, just Agathon's variety. But no, poesis is to make or to create, to be a creator.
To create.
And and you and I worked very closely for a long time on the Orphic understanding of this, because of course Orpheus is the one that all the Neoplatonists come back to talk about this inspired music, and this music that can make Persephone weep, and all of this kind of gift of being a hierophant, right? So that this hierophantic quality of the philosophical theurgic musician, and that I would argue that Socrates is also one of these. I'm confident that Proclus and his Platonic theology even puts Socrates and Orpheus in that kind of same boat, as far as living this particular way of life. But this has got to be, a whirling dervish moment, though, right? Because as you, Stephen, just pointed out, like mapping all of these various different hierarchies, whether it be poetry or music or virtue or ways of life, right? We're starting,
Yeah.
and then even gods, right? And different levels of gods, and that's
It's,
fine.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's very confusing. I've been stuck in Proclus and for years, but you tend to, once you understand his hierarchical relation, how he describes each level, you start to intuitively see it. So, like harmony, 4 levels, it always seems to be 4 or 3 levels. So, he's one of those thinkers that once you've got him or got his sort of general way of viewing, he's relatively easy to navigate. That's probably the wrong word, not easy, but he becomes easier with time. And one of my goals I always like to simplify with diagrams. I'm a very, very visual thinker. And so I like to take all that complexity and try and not reduce it, but try to make it visually understandable. I think that's where I come in and where I work best with Sebastian, because he's got the artistic, aesthetical, kind of diffuse way of thinking, and I've got a very focused way of thinking. So we, in many ways, we see ourselves as Apollonian and Dionysian in our approaches, which is why we work so well. So our real relationship, and in fact our lives in many ways, have taken an Apollonian Dionysian path, and we're both opposites but the same at the same time. Hard to describe, but it's been a really interesting relationship because I see a lot of our own personalities coming out in the way we talk and the way we interact, especially when we're in Leuven. So yeah, the idea of music really interests me into understanding Neoplatonism, because it's something that everybody can understand. And as I've been creating these tables, I've noticed that putting things like harmony and music suddenly makes all those complicated Proclean systems seem a lot easier to understand, because you feel it more than you have to digest it. If you understand what I mean.
Oh no, 100%.
There's almost I think the work we were trying to do together was the concept of dance and the idea of a kind of dance through the Neoplatonic hierarchy, and I kind of think that that's what we're trying to do here.
That's the Dionysian aspect, because when you try to do a representation of this harmony in visual terms, like in tables, maybe you forget the dynamic way of connecting them, because a scheme could be too frozen. But with music, what is interesting is when you have a musical scale, it's more about dynamic relationship between notes. So it's not just that it's a hierarchy in a vertical way, because you have intervals that start making circles. And Iamblichus and Proclus use that especially to represent the epistrophe aspect because they connect number 3 with returning, because number 3 in music produces intervals of 5 notes, and the fifths are the intervals in music that start returning and creating new notes. So that's an interesting thing, that when you try to represent the hierarchy in musical terms, you provide a dynamism that in visual terms you cannot express.
So you guys have inspired so many questions, but I'm going to concentrate first on what Sebastian just said. But don't let me forget to ask about some more about Apollo and Dionysus. So rein me in here. The thing I want to ask you, Sebastian and Stephen, about what Sebastian just said is actually very relevant to contemporary philosophy. We've been living in a kind of metaphysic ontological world that wants to think about identity and subjects and objects and concrete stable things that are always exactly the way they are, and what we need to do is get to the real and find some sort of methodology that gets us to the real objects, to the real world. And one of the things that Sebastian said is something that I have always loved about Neoplatonism, but particularly Platonism, which is the fact that what really is at the heart of it is this dynamism, this living connection, this more mitochondrial networking of relation than things and subjects and objects, right? This indefinite activity or life that music, right? That's why it leads to this epistrophe, is because music reminds us that we're not just notes all by ourselves, right? We're not alone, right? We belong to a song, and that song is moving and changing. And you know what? Like, just like a good jazz musician, or I bet Sebastian, when it's the cello, right, that you play, if I remember correctly, like when Sebastian's riffing on a tune, right? Like since you know the basic notes, you know the scale, it means you can play. It means you can go in an unexpected direction. I mean, this is what I often think about the value of dance. You're moving, and you know the leg work or the footwork or what you're feeling inside, and that means that you can actually leap somewhere new. And so that music is also a testament to the living nature of virtue, the good life, what's real, what we can know, like thinking of epistemology as radically reoriented to this more dynamic activity versus defining, and now I've got the definition, I've got the node, I've got the note, or whatever it might be. And so really speaking to that heart of, music is that mirror of what it means to be eudaimonia, so on and so forth. So yeah, if you mind elaborating on how Platonism has never been a philosophy of subjects and objects, never been a philosophy where we have to get to the forms. No, we are in a radical connectivity, a radical participation. It's a matter of whether or not we can attune ourselves to them. We can learn to play the scale in a way that produces beauty and the good, because we were doing that work of ascending and descending, of valuing how the highest of high notes and the lowest of low notes. All right, so I riffed on a tune. I hope you didn't mind my little solo for a second. All right, musical.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
It was great. I could add a little story about that, because yes, Neoplatonism has been like a sonic metaphysics. I like to bring this concept, because when you understand reality as a space of participation, of a space of resonance, you understand how Neoplatonism is everything is in everything in an appropriate way, because anything and everything is resonating in different ways. But we've been talking about this with Stephen, that first you need to attune your instrument, your lyre, to become resonant. Because if your violin or your guitar is not in tune, you don't resonate well. So when you are in an orchestra, we all tune all together, and the way that the violins and the instruments are designed is to resonate together. They have holes where the sound navigates and connects. And the notion of sympathia or sympatheia it's a musical notion, because it means when two strings or two tubes, two instruments sound together, that's resonation or resonating by sympathy. So, and the story that I wanted to say is the story about Eunomos of Locri. He was playing, he was a lyre player, but one string broke. So a cicada came and planted into the lyre and started singing the string that was broken. So he could finish his song, and he won the contest. And then he went back to Locri, and he built a statue to Apollo, no, in like a thanksgiving to Apollo. So that means how the cicada knew the song is because the cicada was in tune with Apollo, and the lyre player was also in tune with Apollo. So there is this big music that you need to connect, and then you can play. So I think that's the musical way of life, to breathe in. Because do you remember Rainer Maria Rilke has this beautiful poem about an ode to music. He says, music, the breathing of statues, language where words stop. So that means it's this breathing that Wagner also in the Tristan und Isolde ending is the world atom where Tristan und Isolde singing, they reunite in a metaphysical song, but it's not a subject and object metaphysics. It's a resonating field. So with this I can explain that why this is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, again, me going back to my default of being a systematic philosopher, you talking about Platonism not being bound to subject-object. This musical worldview or perspective we're taking reminds me a lot of like a process philosophy, in that it's about relations rather than substance. So you've got this constant, it's Heraclitus versus Parmenides when you take it all the way back to pre-Socratic stuff. So yeah, it's something that I was very because I came to Neoplatonism maybe 10 years ago properly. But before that, I was very much into Schelling, Whitehead, but my love had been Spinoza. So that idea of substance versus process was very much always in my mind. And I'd read about Heraclitus and Parmenides on a basic level before that. So it's interesting that music affords this dynamic approach to Platonism, which is what it should be.
Oh, yes.
And I like that Cicada's story because, of course, that's pertinent to the Sirens, and that's pertinent to the Odyssey, and that's
Pertinent to the
pertinent to the
Phaedrus,
Muses.
where
Yeah,
Phaedrus and Socrates are, being looked at or overheard by the cicadas because they're sitting out in the hot field, and Socrates says, like, look, we shouldn't take a nap. That's what the normal people would do. We want them to report back that we're singing beautiful songs. And so, no, again, like this kind of also this resonance with nature, right? This resonance with knowing the connection of the divine in all things, right? That there is a connection, and we so many of us spend so much of our lives like wrestling with that particular problem, right? It's like, am I connected to nature? Is nature out there? And it's like, no, you're automatically, right? It's there. Enjoy it. Feel the breeze and imagine the song that it is allowing you to sing within your heart. For me, this is why Platonism is so beautiful. But Sebastian's anecdote, the story he told, also re-brought up Apollo. So I know for a fact that many of our listeners don't know this basic distinction as far as music is concerned, and why Dionysus and Apollo, even long before your, one of my favorite it boys, Friedrich Nietzsche, wrote The Birth of Tragedy. I can't wait to talk about that if we'd like, but let's see if we can talk about it from within the context of the Platonist first. So why are we appealing to these two gods, and why are they different? Why Sebastian be a more Dionysian and Stephen be a more Apollonian? I don't know what I would be in this trio, but we can kind of speculate on that in a minute.
Do you want to answer, Stephen, or
so why Apollo and Dionysus?
yes? Then I could say anything
Um,
about music later.
well, primarily because Apollo and Dionysus feature as principles in the Neoplatonic system. And traditionally, Apollo and Dionysus were seen as opposites in terms of music. Apollonian music, the Paean, was seen as orderly and peaceful, whereas the Dionysian dithyramb was a bit ecstatic, a bit just generated passions and ecstasy,
It's house music,
whereas
right?
Paeans were soothing. Basically, yeah, exactly. Although, yeah, I think so. But anyway, the idea being that in the Zeus, the demiurge in Neoplatonism and Platonism, who's the father of Apollo and Dionysus, unites these two principles within himself as a demiurge. And that's how we started our presentation in Leuven, where we spoke about the creation of the universe by the demiurge Zeus. And these two principles represent opposing functions. So the Apollonian part unifies and brings together into unity. The Dionysian, because in the myth Orphic myth, Dionysus is torn apart, which is called the sparagmos. And so he's seen as the principle of division. So you've got unity and division, which is a core element of Neoplatonism as a dialectic in the middle of the demiurge, and then they become two principles by themselves. And that allows us to look at that relationship. Apollo and Dionysus, in terms of music, was always seen as Apollo was the superior and Dionysian was dangerous. Now, the interesting thing about Neoplatonism is that it uses the Orphic myth, where Apollo and Dionysus are kind of not opposed. Apollo actually brings back the parts of Dionysus by the command of Zeus, and that's when he becomes reborn, etc. So what's different about Neoplatonism is that they're not seen as positive and negative, which a lot of people do. Even Nietzsche sort of hints at that, but brings them together again in the artistic impulse, which we'll come to. So, in a nutshell, Apollo and Dionysus were seen musically in ancient times as two different types of music. One was Apollonian, which was therapeutic. One was Dionysian, which was all about ecstasy and abandonment. So, I don't know what you want to add to that, Sebastian. That's the basic
That's the basic, and
idea in Platonism.
we could add that the Apollonian was considered like the model of or the paradigm of order of cosmos, because the scale of the Timaeus it's in the Dorian mode, and the Dorian mode means that it's the national Greek model of being virtues, no? Like, because Proclus reminds us of the Laches of Plato, where Plato says that we need to tune our lyre inside that in the Dorian mode, which means this Apollonian order. That is the Philolaus, the scale of Philolaus, when Philolaus, the Pythagorean, mentions that the universe is harmonized peras and apeiron in this Dorian scale, which is composed by tetrachords, which are syllaba in the Dorian dialect of Philolaus. That means the elements or the elements of the universe. So, but the Dionysian is in the Frisian mode. The instruments, the aulos, the wind instrument that has two, so it's duality also, but Apollonian is unity, because Apollon was the god of non-multiplicity, Apollon, no? So that's the idea of harmony as genosis. So the Dionysian is the immanence, all this fragmenting and the spark of the divine coming inside everything, and then it needs to go back. But as Alcibiades says in the Symposium, Socrates is like Silenus, no? He is this ecstatic figure because his words are like magic, or he has this power of ecstasies. But Socrates has inside this Hermes, like Silenus has a statue of Hermes inside. So Hermes is what connects us with the Apollonian. So we need to do the full circle, no? The light entering into the universe, and then we need to collect it from there like a spark, but always with inspiration, because if we don't have inspiration, we cannot connect back to the Apollonian. I think that is something that also appears in Romanticism later, that Nietzsche has a dialogue with Wagner about this.
No, I mean, a lot of people think that when it comes to the relationship of Platonism to myth making and ancient Greek pantheons and things like this, that it's static, right? That it's like, this is what this person means, or like as if, right, that these stories aren't constantly being retold and adapted. Like I was saying with regards to a good jazz riff, you know, you're taking a tune and you know how to play with it, right? And so what Sebastian just did by bringing up Hermes is and showing that, look, you know, there's myths where Dionysus is more Apollonian himself, right? And there are myths where, you know, Apollo, of course, you know, receives the pipes of Pan, right? And so that, like, there's relationships between these things, and you know, one of the things that I love about Nietzsche is that he understands that these are dynamic relationships, right? That we need to keep making new myths, that keep these things, these songs alive, and that's the real important part. It's not whether or not I told the story of Dionysus and Ariadne perfectly, no, but that I tell it in such a way that it actually made music, right? That they could be godly again, they can inspire again, because that's what the gods want to do, is be gods and not just, you know, notes in the background of something that happened 2,500 years ago. They want to keep playing, and that means that they've, you know, keep dancing, keep inspiring, so on and so forth. So that's why the Hermes is also a kind of Dionysus. I mean, if you look at the Cratylus, I love that Proclus loves to take that moment and be like, huh, and this actually happens in the Cratylus too, right? Is Pan the brother of Hermes or the son? I don't know. Or if I'm going to talk about Persephone, should I say Proserpina? I don't know. It's a dangerous name. Or when you flash forward to, Egypt at the turn of the millennia, or the Renaissance, the adaptation of, going from Thoth to Hermes Trismegistus to Hermes the psychopomp in the Renaissance. So could you speak to this kind of playful aspect of this musical life that is the philosophical life, that is the theurgic life? And so
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Sebastian and I is that I describe myself as having an Apollonian approach, and Sebastian has a Dionysian. But the thing that unites us very strongly is allegorical interpretation of myth. So one of the things that this project has thrown up is that the relationships that we're focusing on is Zeus as the demiurge, Apollo and Dionysus as gods in their own right as a relationship, but also Hermes because he's in there as well in that diagram, which hopefully will be available in detail in the
I can show it.
show. Sebastian can show in a second, and we'll hopefully get on. Anyway, the point being that I've been looking at all different myths about the relationships. For example, Zeus and Dionysus are equated as the same in the Orphic hymn to Sebastios. And then Apollo and Dionysus have different relationships according to different myths. And then Hermes creates in the Homeric hymn to Hermes, creates out of a tortoiseshell the lyre that he gives to Apollo. So it's actually Hermes who invents the lyre that Apollo then becomes famous for. And Hermes then picks up the pipe and plays that. And then you've got the relationship of Hermes to Pan, and then you've got the relationship of, as Sebastian just said, Socrates is likened to a Silenus statue, which when you open it up has got a god inside, and his voice is likened. A very important myth is Marsyas, who was the student of, was it Pan? He was taught to play by.
either Chiron
Anyway,
or
he's a
Pan. I forget which one, but yeah, Chiron or Pan.
anyway. Marsyas being he was the Dionysian, and he has a contest with Apollo, and he loses and he's flayed, and that became a picture famous in the Renaissance by painters like Titian, and it becomes an important metaphor that can be seen as Apollonian purifying the Dionysian, or as Edgar Wynne says, it's actually a Dionysian rite of purification. So basically what I'm saying is that there's so many myths around these central characters where they actually they become identified with each other, that these relationships aren't static. And the other great thing about that, going back to the idea of divine madness, is you've got Apollo, Dionysus, and the Muses. And Hermes says that this diagram where you've got Muses, Dionysus, Apollo, and love, or in the scale, is not static, because the three lower ones, the donor gods, not love, but the other three gods are all in each other, and they just one dominates depending on which you're looking at. So it's the all-in-all principle, and I'm applying that to these relationships. I'm not saying, I don't want it to be static, that this is what Proclus says, so that's all we can say. I want to bring in other thinkers and say this is a Nietzschean view of it, and this is I don't know.
Because you just said one of the most
So yeah,
important things, the all in all, right? But this is also connected what you were saying earlier to the sympathia, right? Like just drawn to like, but like doesn't necessarily mean exactly the same. It means like, relation, sympathia. This is what makes it
yeah,
a Syria, a chain. And this is also, one time, like often people when they open up the Neoplatonists or the Plato or any author kind of blessed to have been inspired by the Muses or Dionysus or Apollo or Eros, it becomes very confusing because it so Orpheus seems to be Dionysus reborn. Dionysus is Zeus reborn, and then the cycle starts again, right? And this is one of the things that I do see why Nietzsche became obsessed with the eternal return of the same, right? Where like everything infinitely repeats these beautiful myths in some such way, and we're drawn to them because. So I do want to get to a question about the opening of your presentation, because one of the things that I love about Proclus's commentary, even though I think he's wrong, I don't think the Timaeus takes place the day after the Republic. So I don't think that Timaeus was there during the Republic being silent. However, I do think that Proclus is still right that in whatever version of the Republic that Timaeus overheard the day before, the importance of sitting there and taking it all in, that this was the prelude, that's part of how we become demiurgic. So many young people want to immediately rush out into the world and say, I've got a song, I've got a message, I've got all the meat, as one might say, and don't take that time to develop the discipline to hear what's being said, and to become receptive to the forms and ideas, and to bring them in, and then to bring them in such a way that you can transform them. Like, so the discipline that goes in, right? When we think about ascending the scales of virtue, it's very rare for a Platonist to be like, you're born theurgic. It's like, no, there's a process here. There's like time for recognizing your natural virtues, the things that you're capable of, recognizing your role in society, recognizing the need to purify yourself, and all of this is going to take discipline and practice. It's not going to necessarily just wake up one day, manna from heaven, and you're so transformed. And so this is one of the reasons why I really appreciate that the Timaeus, right, or Proclus's commentary on it, begins with the importance of there has to be a prelude. There has to be, and then the gendered issues to it as well. So the idea of the importance of the prelude, and then the construction of nomos and the world soul, and the mathematics / music that the demiurge creates, because when we're talking about collapsing all sorts of things, Proclus emphasizes, you talk about in your research, that Timaeus becomes demiurgic, which means he becomes Dionysian, which means he becomes Apollonian, he becomes Zeusian, so on and so forth, and hopefully therein says something that makes it possible, if we're listening well, to become demiurgic, so on and so on. So there's that statement, which is this kind of beautiful cycle of I don't know, I'll put it in a funny way, putting on different robes of different gods for infinitely unlimited forever. So that the cycle of music is both one and many, both limit and unlimited, both Apollonian and Dionysian. And then I want to get to the gendered issues of this too, right? Because Stephen brought up the fact that, it seems as if Dionysus is lower than Apollo, right? But this is also represented in the kind of codedness of the male and the female, or to put it in God terms, that seeing Hera is lower than Zeus, right? Or that night is second to Phanes, and so the step down, and so that when we're talking about this kind of hierarchy, sometimes some people interpret it as being disparaging of the feminine. But hopefully, part of what you guys are doing in your research when you talk about the importance of receptivity is to show that things that are typically coded feminine are not passive, right? To be receptive to what Socrates said in the Republic was an active work on Timaeus's part. It was a discipline. It was a power, and a superpower at that. And it's typically a femininely coded superpower. So that when we talked about process philosophy, and Neoplatonism being like that in the sense of emphasizing the sonic form of doing philosophy. That's when we really get into what the Neoplatonists described as the feminine aspect of reality, this living, because this is the realm of intelligible, intellective, or the eternity. This is the life of the soul, and this, for the Neoplatonists, is the divine feminine. But how can that be if it's coded as second? All right, so two weird questions. The first one having to do with this kind of infinite unlimitedness, and then do you have anything to say about the codedness as far as gender is concerned? All the while, bringing it back to the opening of your particular presentation and the value of preludes and openings and taking on the demiurgic role that Timaeus does. I know that was a lot. I'm sorry.
It's a lot. Well, I could mention something about the connection between the prelude and the receptivity, so to connect both both aspects. Because when you start playing a prelude, like in many works, like Bach suites for cello, Bach's sonatas for violin, there is always a prelude. No, that's a tradition in Renaissance music that comes from the ricercare. That means you search for the tonal space in which you are going to play. You tune in your instrument, you warm it up, which is also a feminine thing to do with the instrument. You need to make it alive, to resonate. So, and you need to find the scale in your that you need to play. So you need to find also the relationships which are mathematical, but you found them in a living way. And then here we have this idea that music is connected to water, but it's also connected to the goddess of the nocturnal, like Isis in Romanticism. Because we have Novalis, hymns to the night, put in music by Schubert. We have the Chopin nocturnes or Beethoven sonata Moonlight. No, it's this idea that in the night you become receptive because you become hi-fi. No, hi-fi means you have a hi-fi receptivity because everything is quiet. You can listen. You connect during the night. And for Beethoven and many musicians, this was connecting to the mysteries of Isis, and they took that from Plutarch and from also Proclus. The mysteries of the Isis is Isis with the veil, and this appears in Novalis, this appears in Schiller, and so it's a very big tradition about this idea of music connected to the nymphs, also to the muses that are feminine, and it's this idea that the sirens are also feminine, are not temptress only. We've been studying this with Stephen. The sirens are also this interpretation of the sirens is dynamic, like the cicadas also in the Phaedrus. You can be, I don't know, fascinated by them, or with nature as well, like the nymphs, like in the Phaedrus. You can get inspired and enchanted, but that enchantment is what brings you to the higher levels of the gods. Otherwise, the soul has not this energy. That Plotinus says, love is the energy of the soul. So when Timaeus,
That's why Odysseus has to hear the music.
yes, he has
It's
to learn
like
the math.
he has to, in order to get part of his trial is to actually be the first person to hear the music of the sirens and not be lured away to their island. But sorry to interrupt, Sebastian, but we'll come back if you want to finish off. But the gendering and the feminine, one of the things we had talked about quite a lot was the importance of the second intelligible triad, which for people that aren't familiar with the Proclean metaphysics is the sort of middle of the top level of his system. But that is the primal bond, or scasis in ancient Greek. And it's also gives rise to what is called the first intelligible triad, intelligible intellectual triad, which is the first part of the second level, and that is equated with night, who Danny just mentioned. But night is the goddess in the Neoplatonic view that takes the intelligible paradigm that Demiurge will use and brings it through herself into the light of Uranus, the heavenly celestial revolution. So for me, the idea of the divine feminine is always as scasis, as the bond, the absolute necessity. So it's not below the male principle, which is normally seen as the first of the triad. For me, if I was visualizing it, it's like an inverted triangle. So you've got the male, the female, and then the product. It's not like one's lower. And I think that's an important, for me anyway, and especially going, one of the first contacts or experience I had of Danny was reading your paper on night, and I really loved the approach to it. So it's kind of that thinking is to me as primal bond, the first divine feminine,
The living
as
element binds
intelligent
the subject objects,
with it,
right?
it's the most important part of the intelligent realm. It's the glue that holds everything together.
We found musicality with Stephen. We were trying to find where does music appears in the Proclean system, the first genetic manifestation of the musical, no? And we were talking about this idea that in the moment of life, or in the peras apeiron product or micton, is this second moment that is always female, no? Female in the metaphysics of Proclus, or is this where music is connected to life? And Proclus in the Timaeus commentary says proportional life, analogia and life are what is the glue of reality, no? So it's this living aspect that gives to the more mathematical structural thing also like the inspiration in the Young, the magnetic chain of the muses, no, goes to the Sirens, then goes to the singer or to the rhapsode. So it's this life, no, is what makes possible and I think it's Dionysian, no,
No,
that
so I'm gonna do something very girly now, and I'm not gonna be ashamed of it, because I think it's actually one of the most beautiful things at the heart of Platonism and what we're talking about here, right? Why is it that there are traditions and times and epochs where there's a code like everything just comes together, like the Renaissance, like classical Athens, like the Romantics, right? Is that there's a kind of revival of remembering that philosophy and music and romance, romance, right? The erotic they're all intertwined, right? Like and it's okay to couch philosophy in this kind of beautiful, constant, never-ending affair, right? Like because the highest levels for the Neoplatonists is the impenetrable chamber, which is both a place where new boots are knocking, but it's also a symbol of the feminine throughout all of history, the womb of creation, and
Exactly.
to be thinking about divine Sophia, or like when somebody is playing a piece of music, like I couldn't help it when you were talking about warming up your cello or your instrument, as this is the seduction, right? This is the time when we're giving you this kind of space to see if you want to play with us, right? And we think of this as kind of courtly and a process of respect and care and love, and so that we see the interconnections, like who can really have a romantic time, who can really be erotic without music in the background, right? Where's your sade? And so these kinds of
Well,
remembrances, yeah.
what I love about Platonism and Neoplatonism is, talking of love, is that for example, the four types of divine madness are the Muses, Dionysian, Apollonian, and then erotic. And the highest is erotic. So love is permeates. And quite ironically, just before I came onto this podcast, I shared a post that was from one of the groups I follow, which was, the title just said, "The symposium is actually all about love." And I was like, well, yeah. But that's the essence of it. That what I love is that, I love the fact that Platonism centralizes love as its engine. So it removes that kind of. It's easy to get lost in the abstractness of Proclus, but when I shared with that post a very long passage from his Alcibiades commentary, which is all about the art of love. And reading through it again, it was sort of really moving. I forgot how romantic and poetic Proclus can be. Can be very dry, of course, but that's central to it, yeah. And that for me all relates back to the central bond of divine feminine.
And also of the primordiality of the erotic madness, because the other three are also in dance and unconnected, everyone inside each other, because of the love is the primordial madness.
Yeah, love is almost, because in Hermes he says the three donor gods, which he's saying is Apollo, Dionysus, and the Muses, are all in each other. But he doesn't, love is almost like transcendent and doesn't need to, it's just it's the whole thing.
In Romeo and Juliet, you have the balcony scene that Juliet says something that goes against this idea of philosophy that believes in subject-object divisions, because she says, forget your name, forget you are Romeo. What's in a name? No, if you abandon your name, you can come to me, and my love is deep as the ocean. No, she says something like that. So it's going back to that. And this oceanic love is what appears in all this music.
Yeah, and this is why somebody like Nietzsche, I think, gets at the real tradition, the real chord, if you will, like the real kind of flow, because like in the Spoke Zarathustra, like what it becomes about is this, you know, the life and wisdom, and they're personified as these feminine knights, right? And so he too is making the Spoke Zarathustra in an attempt to, you know, communicate the eternal return of the same in this kind of language of the affair, right? And you know, we think about, you know, musicians and composers, and you know, that inspiration is this beauty, right? And that it's you know, typical to be imagining like, oh, yeah, that my muse was a woman, right? Or the person I love. So again, it doesn't, the divine feminine this is not a gender essentialism, right? This is why I love mythology, because, you know, you think of Dionysus, and he's the twice born god, the one, you know, that, you know, comes, you know, born once in here or in the West, and then also reborn in the so-called East. But because of this, he's liminal. A lot of people don't realize this, but Dionysus, you know, classically wouldn't be, you know, your big burly, you know, Greek kind of god. No, he was this kind of beautifully feminine, curly blondish hair, so looked like a Thracian, so ergo would have been associated with slavery in the Athenian mind. And so, you know, we've got to remember that the Greeks did a solid for us and made sure that, you know, gender essentialism was not a thing within their culture, that there was this kind of beautiful, if you were going to be healthy, if you were going to be eudaimonistic, you would have this more musical relationship to these kinds of categories. Yeah. So anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to your paper, you know, I see a lot of the concepts of phanies or fannies in the similar way, and you brought that out a lot as well in the same paper, saying, you know, don't forget that fannies is beyond the binary of male female, but is more than and less than and stuff like that. And it's true that, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity about fannies in the Orphic mythology, and that's good.
In Pythagoreanism, also the monad or the one is arenotellus. It's also male, female at the same time. So it's beyond that. Then when the intervals come 2 and 3, then become creating the intervals in music, like in Chinese music also. There is this idea that there are female and male notes, but they get together and they come from a unity. In Pythagoreanism is this monad, but in the Chinese tradition is the phoenix, or this bird that is singing the notes, and is yin and yang at the same time. So this appears in many traditions, this idea of music is the harmony of the opposites, but not opposites. They are complementary in music. No, that's the good idea of harmony.
Yeah, it's such a good vehicle to use. You know, we haven't really got onto things like poetry much and literary stuff, but that's another thing. That's where I want Sebastian to come into his own, because that's his bag more than mine. But there's so much scope here.
No, we're definitely
To
going to have to do a
explore.
follow-up. I'm too excited about this conversation for it to end completely now. So yeah, let's go there, right? Like, so when, you know, now that we're riffing on the tune of romance and relation, harmony, and bringing it together, we can be also thinking about the fact that at the opening of the Critias, it's repeated over and over again that Timaeus has become a poet, right? That he's you know, given us a hymn or a poem. What you guys know, I would argue, is a prayer, right? And so,
Yeah.
basically, you know, when we think about the commentary on the Timaeus and the construction of the world soul through ratios and harmonies, through circles and shapes, you know, art basically, that circle of the same and the other. One of the things I love about your research is that you don't limit yourself to just, you know, Plato's Timaeus or the commentary on the Timaeus. Like, you guys like have been diving into the art, the what are those etching things that the Renaissance people made that, you know, show you these particular, how they map onto the gods and they map onto the stars, and they put these in their bedroom so that they're reminded to pray to them and relate to them, so that's why the Renaissance was filled with so much. Some people, and I know this is not all people, but it is a thought that they could have, that the Renaissance is like too much eye candy. There's just way much it's too busy. Like there's something everywhere, right? But that's the point, was to be able to recall these symbols all of the time. So yeah, could you speak to that? Like, why do you feel comfortable, and why do you think it's necessary to keep making sure that people see that this isn't just located to Plato's Timaeus? This isn't just located to the commentary. This was something people studied and did throughout history. I often use the Renaissance as an example, but there are plenty of other pockets of time where this kind of revival of these values comes about. Yeah, could you speak to that?
Well, I could mention, yeah, through the whole history, this interaction between philosophy, poetry, music has a Neoplatonic origin, or is this current that is like undercurrent of everything that inspires people. Educational systems, no, like in Boetius, we have the three levels that we've been talking in Proclus. There are also musica mundana, musica humana, musica instrumentalis, and then we have in the composers. We have Gregorian Chant that is based on the Greek modes in a different disposition, because they were adapted by Ambrosius and then Gregor. So we have these Gregorian modes, but it's the similar structures, but with different names, because, well, I cannot enter into that, but it was an adaptation. And then we have the idea that the composers of polyphonic music, they used popular music to create their masses. So it was this idea of the immediate improvisatory power of music, which is in popular music, was used in polyphonic music. And then when opera was created in this Florentine ambience, no, like Marsilio Ficino and the Camerata Fiorentina, they also were connecting the Flemish school with the Italian and the French canzone or chanson, which is more Orphic, and because Marsilio Ficino was singing to the gods, the same like as Proclus. No, Proclus was also singing hymns, because Proclus says something that Ficino translated into Latin, that the whole universe is singing to its causes. The flowers sing a hymn, because with the little petals, the petals are the mouths of the flowers, so they sing. The animals sing to their own gods, and there is this magnetic chains. So this all continues into classical music. Mozart writing about the Macrobius commentary on the Somnius Scipionis is one of his first operas. Bastianum Bastiana has this power of music as magic, but which is also love. And also then we have Beethoven. That is in Beethoven, it is this combination of the inspiration of poetry like Shakespeare, but also like classical authors like Plutarch. And Beethoven has his Ninth Symphony that has a movement that is Apollonian, that is the adagio or the slow movement, which is contemplative, but then it has the scherzo, which is very dynamic or ecstatic. And then in the last movement is the unification, no, of the Apollonian and Dionysian with cymbal clash, which is Dionysian. But then we have also the violins, which are ethereal and Apollonian. So there are many connections, no, symbolic. And then in Romanticism, this is also developed by Liszt.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I answered.
I mean, to sort of add to what Sebastian just said, I think you've got to remember that Timaeus was the only text in the Latin West of Plato for the best part of 1,000 years. So it's such a foundational text, and one of we haven't spoken much about, but the music of the spheres was a very important concept, which found itself in people like Capella, Macrobius, and then went through the Middle Ages and came back again especially in the Renaissance to people like Ficino. So obviously it's going to have a great impact on the Western intellectual tradition. So it's not surprising to me to find it in all sorts of places you wouldn't expect. I mean, there was a book written, I can't remember what it's called, but it looked at the history of the Timaeus and just how widespread its influence was, and it is. So that's why it's given us such an easy path into other things. But that Apollo Dionysian dialectic in particular, I think even people who don't quite know what it is can immediately sort of think, right, I can just by osmosis from popular culture, they can tell that it's going to be something to do with maybe light and dark, as somebody like Robert Flood then described it. He had God creating the Apollonian and Dionysian, and one was light and one was dark. So it's a fundamental duality that goes all the way back to the idea of light and dark in Zoroastrianism. So it's got that kind of primordial draw that I think allows, especially me, to explore a side of me which, because I'm good at making connections and finding connections, and I wanted to pull in pictures of art. And I even found, for example, not many people use it, but Friedrich Nietzsche did a whole thing called Dionysian dithyrambs, right? And so I like taking bits of that and putting that with a bit of art, and then a quote of music, a quote from Proclus, a quote from Ficino, and that just brings it alive. It brings it out of just the sort of abstract thing, and it also appeals to people from all different areas. They see something in a work of art they may not have seen before or understood before, etc., etc.
And I forgot to mention that they can see in a painting, they can see also the harmonic proportions that are in the scale or in a building. So this what Stephen is mentioning, this interaction between arts, thanks to Neoplatonism, is very fundamental, because, as you mentioned, these buildings that Federico da Montefeltro had, this studiolo, no, in Urbino, which has the sciences of the quadrivium and the trivium, the muses, and a little chapel to pray to the muses. No, so there was a chapel there in that building in Urbino. So it's very interesting how this is a living tradition. No, something that
Yeah, it's had such a powerful impact on aesthetics as well, and things like the Hagia Sophia and all sorts of different cathedrals have been
Design.
based on Neoplatonic principles: light, dark, sound, etc., etc.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was going to emphasize is that, if the building of an opera house, it was a create like to be able to house the music, right? So that you had to do the mathematics to kind of know how a voice would carry or how an instrument, like we forget that the beauty, right? And all the work that goes into the architecture or, when we're right now as a team of us at Palinode, we're doing this Primavera project where we're doing philosophy and but we're doing philosophy with Botticelli, and we're going through it and showing how Botticelli is utilizing mythology and the Graces and Hermes and Sophia slash Madonna slash all of these things. And I mean, this is I think the project of Palinode and Cora is to be part of reminding people that to be a philosopher, you don't have to be an academic, as I always say, with elbow patches and a pipe and a snooty attitude, who doesn't really actually want to connect with anybody. He just wants to dominate the world with his amazing intellect. I mean, that's very not Platonic. But so this is so I'm gonna say right now, guys, that you guys have to come back. This is not over. But this is the the nature of a podcast. We've got to close things down. And I thought, since you said what you said, Stephen, it inspired me to have a kind of silly question for my final question, because yeah, philosophy, theurgy, all these things that seem abstract, they found themselves in the hands of a painter, or they found themselves in the hand of a poet who may not actually be able to, wax philosophically about, Hegel's dialectic or even Plato's Parmenides or whatever it might be. But man, can they speak to our soul? Man, can they put us back into alignment? And so here's my silly question, guys. We've been talking about music, and we have been, being very good academics slash intellectuals, and name dropping things like Beethoven and Botticelli and Wagner and Nietzsche and Plato, of course. So, what's your guilty pleasure? Like, I think it'd be fun for people to hear that, people like yourselves who love music, right? Who really invest themselves into the value of music. What is it that you listen to that some people would be like, ugh? Your guilty pleasure, the one. All right, I'll tell you mine. All right, I'll wait. I'll let you guys know my guilty pleasure. Maybe perhaps after yours. What music would you
well,
say? Yeah.
well, I post the music I listen to on Facebook, and I know most people are not going to like house music, right? So, but music was. I was always obsessed with music, especially electronic music as a child, right? And I don't know what it is, but there's something about repetitive beats and stuff like that that uplifts me and makes me. I like rhythm, I like dancing. I'm a bit too old for that now, but uh, I don't have any guilty pleasures, let's put it that way. But I'd say my music choice is probably not to everybody's, certainly not going to be to everybody's taste. And so, in that respect, I put mine all out there. I don't have anything that I listen to that I'd say would be, because a lot of my stuff hasn't got lyrics for a start, right? So I haven't got a song. I do have like, because when I was a child, apparently I was obsessed with this UK glam rock band called Sweet or something like that. And so every now and again, I'll sort of listen to the track that apparently I used to jump up and down in my cot to. So that's as close as I get to my guilty secret.
Nice. And I like that. I like the transfer. Like, let's not feel guilty about it. Like we're out and about. We've got no shame. We love our Alanis Morissette or our Billy Joels. Ooh, I know I can't say I said it out loud. But yeah, no. That for me, these are sometimes what I want. I need the release music, the kind of music that. Oh, for me, I'll save one more for after Sebastian. Sebastian, do you have a guilty pleasure?
Well, because I'm always like listening, like Beethoven or classical music, and this which we might call it classical, yes, music that in the concert hall. But yes, I would say that I like K-pop and J-pop. But I think I found in that music some nostalgia or nostalgic music from the 80s, which is still, how do you say, relevant or working in some way. Because that music sounds to me like the music that when I was
Child.
listening in the 80s. And also it's connected with some kind of sound from computer games at that moment that were very, very, I don't know, basic, like Commodore 64 things, and prog rock. No, it has some kind of also instrumentation of prog rock, like synthesizers in some of these songs, but especially the arrangement. They sound like music from the 80s, I think. And yes, I think.
I tease him mercilessly about that one.
Well, my final guilty pleasure is actually just country music at large, right? Like the kind of music where you either remember what it's like to be a Texan girl in a pool hall, and doing all the shots and things like that, or the kind of music that your dog dies, your wife leaves you, and like oh. But why for me is because yes, my youth is one of the reasons why, but also I have a real faith, I guess, if you will, that every song that is ever made, even the pop crap that is constructed by companies to sell, what they're utilizing, right, are these notes that we did hear in our homes, and they remind us, they lull us back into the songs of our mothers, whether that be 200 years ago in a village in some small area of Scotland, right? Like, for me, country music is reminiscent of this kind of Celtic, Irish, lullabying, right? But that Celtic, Irish, that comes from other different worlds, and so that this kind of transference, even in the little ditty, even in the bard who's just ding 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 ding, there's something there, and that we have the chops sometimes to be able to even appreciate something that most of society would regard as that's not really music, and so.
Well, I'd say that to end on, I'll refer that to perhaps that's Iamblichus, who says that there are certain songs that have he calls it an ichnos, which is the Greek for trace, but what he means by that is a synthemata, which is a technical term in Neoplatonism, which means it's a token, a signature that's been put into certain sounds. When a soul hears it's not conscious, but a certain sound will trigger this trace in the soul that reminds it of the divine harmony it heard when it was up with the gods before it descended into a body. So I'd like to say that if you've got any guilty pleasures, that's what it is. That's reminding you of your true home, if you like, even if it's your physical home of your childhood. It's the same idea. It's that ichnos. It's the trace of a memory that is dear to you.
Yes. And the good thing is that in music, the ichnos become like an echo, because if we interpret the ichnos only in a visual, like a footstep, but it could be also like a sonic footstep, no, like a resonance, like an echo.
It's absolutely
That's
that.
that also.
That's
And music activates it, like with vibration. Yes.
So your country dancing takes you back to your spiritual home.
Yeah, that's right. Back when we all, did, circle dancing and all that fun, silly hootenanny. And anyways, whether that be, the Texas version of it or the Celtic version of it or the, Thracian tribal element of it, who knows, right? But at least it allows us to journey. Oh God, did I bring up another guilty pleasure? Ugh. Okay. So I shall see you guys hopefully very, very soon. To the
I
audience,
look forward to it.
say again.
I very much look forward to it.
I
It's
do
been
too. I very much
a
look forward
blast.
to
I
it.
I
enjoyed it.
look forward very much to it.
Yeah. So I'll email and try to arrange that. But I would like everybody to take the time to go to sebastianmoro.com. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and to check out all of his articles. Each one is available. I want to pay particular attention to music and the return of the soul, which is in the Ancient Approaches to Plato's Republic, edited by Anne Shepard. And then people, like, one of the coolest places, like if you're wanting to learn about Neoplatonism and you want what's your gateway drug and you don't know what it is, I highly recommend that even if you're young and you've deleted your Facebook app, get back on the Facebook and come hang out with some old people in the Neoplatonism group, because Sebastian and several others who run that group do such a great job monitoring it, answering questions, putting up quotes, explaining things, that I am confident that there are many young people out there, or many initiates, even if they're older, to the Neoplatonic world that have been greatly helped by the guidance of Stephen Rego. So please, all of you, go check out the website and the articles and get back on the Facebook and have the fun with these two amazing thinkers. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Oh, dear.